Last Saturday, the 10th of January, we did a live broadcast where we spoke about the changing landscape of home education in this country, taking into account things like the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill and also the cohort, how the cohort is changing, the types of people that are choosing home education, the reasons people are home educating. So there's a number, we've cut it up into clips, so you can go and watch sort of little clips of it, but there is also the entire live if you want to watch the whole thing from start to finish. It went on for 7 hours, so it was a good long time, and we really got into things quite deeply. We had Fiona Nicholson with us, Joe Merritt, Jen Hodge, Alison Sauer, Randall Hardy, and of course Michelle and I were hosting that for most of the day. So it's quite informative. So if you want to go and have a look, there's Kat is just showing the live, which was the long one, and then we do have the clips, so you can go and catch up with that. If particularly if you're wanting to, you don't quite understand the new amendments and that kind of thing, we covered some of those in there as well. So we explain it a little bit, and that might be a better way for you to take in that information. Next up in Parliament, we had a written question, which was to ask the Secretary of State for Education what steps she is taking to reduce to reduce public access to, and B, ensure the online security of the children not in school register proposed in the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill. And this register is the thing that we as home educators will find that our children's names are on. And Josh McAllister, let's see, he said this section 436C prohibits information from a local authority sort of publishing that register or including the name or address of a parent or eligible child that would identify them. They expect to hold it securely, but I think we all well know what the track record is on secure records. And actually, this is a really important point right now. If we're going to be talking a little bit about amendments, but if you want to suggest an amendment to a law, you can perhaps make a suggestion regarding this register, and at the same time, while you're suggesting them, link to some of the nasty headlines where leaks have happened, just to back up the amendment that you're proposing. This is one of the ones that the things that we have an issue with and we are concerned about is hacking or leaks and that kind of thing. So this brings us on to the amendments. We have had quite a few lords adding new amendments, some of them which will affect us as home educators directly. Some of them are really nasty. Some are very helpful. We have some lords that are, more supportive of home educators, and they've tried, like Lord Way, he has tried to put things in there that will mitigate some of the more worrying aspects and other amendments that have been put in.
Can I just say,
yes, please do, Michelle.
What we do want people to do, because remember, peers may not be aware of this. If you've already been writing to a peer, and it's not Lord Way because he's put these in, and you actually think they should support that, they don't want reams. Literally a really quick brief in the subject line, Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, and then put, please support, and then take the number from the amendment list and put that in there. Because we need them to support Lord Way, because we need the ones we want to go through. We need other people in the House to agree that that's a good amendment and it should be moved forward. And if we're not telling peers this matters to us, it will get dismissed. And it shouldn't get dismissed because obviously Lord Way is Lord Way. However, they also are very aware that he's personally invested because he's home educated. He has home educated his own children. So we need the non-home educating peers to realise, no, this isn't just Lord Way being a home educator. This is what home educators here now in the real world want supported, so that he can get next to the Lord Way support. You'll see on a few other amendments supported by, and they have a load of other peers. So it'd be lovely, by the point this is being discussed, probably, I think it's Wednesday, if there was a load of other names underneath Lord Way supporting those individual amendments, because it will help him and it will help the House realise it matters.
Yeah, the other ones which bring some balance into the bill is Lord Crisp. So have a look at the amendments by Lord Way and Lord Crisp. and write to other lords and ask them if they will support that. So the ones we are more concerned with is Baroness Smith of Malvern, who represents the government. So she has added some amendments. Some of them we do discuss them in that live video I mentioned from last Saturday. So if you want to go and hear more about them, and also Fiona Nicholson of edyourself.org, she has got some articles or some blog posts on that where she explains it really clearly. And there are some worrying trends. What it is it's not going to make home education impossible, but it is basically they're putting in things that are showing a direction of travel where things could become more and more restrictive and harder for people to withdraw their children from school. So those kinds of things you need to know more about, and we don't have enough time to get into it tonight. So please go and watch those videos on the Home Education channel to find out more, or go and read Fiona Nicholson's blog. Michelle, what actions can we be doing right now with respect to the report stage?
Right, we need to be quick on this, because they need to get in before the date the clause is being discussed. And that's not an exact science, because it does depend how much discussion is had before they move or withdraw or divide on each amendment. Anything for Monday, probably, other than to get them to support something already on there, so already on the amendment list, definitely contact peers and say, I've seen this amendment by this lord, and then quote which bit it is. Please, can you speak in favour of that? That's one thing you can do. However, the later days, there's still time to get new amendments in. So if you go through that list, I've already said about what we can do for Lord Way. If you go through that list and actually you think, hang on, something big is missing. So one thing actually I was just discussing, and I will be sending it to certain peers straight after this call, is the bit about considering where the child lives straight after deregistration. Now, that's putting every parent treated as suspicious. So I think if they're going to go that way, I don't think they should go that way at all. Then it should be consider if there is a risk of significant harm where the child lives. Because I think that's a reasonable and proportionate manner. Whereas at the moment, just being a parent who makes a different decision is enough for them to consider it. So have a look, see if there's a few words that if they were added might actually make that palatable, might make it workable. The peers don't want world peace. They really don't want big essays. They haven't got the time. They want to know what you're asking for. Stick in the subject line, Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, so they know. They're dealing with lots of bills at the moment. So they need to know, is this something I need to look at today, or can I leave it? Obviously, for us, it's important all the time. But for them, they'll be discussing something different on Tuesday to what they're discussing Monday. So they need to know, this might be relevant to today. And then take the work out of them. They don't need all the social niceties. I know it feels wrong. They need to know what you want. So they need to know, like this one, Baroness Baron at clause 7. And then you say, please actively go against it, or please support it. I think this is a good idea. That level of detail, if it's already on there. If it's not already on there, you need to be very specific. So you might say, look at clause 31, because that's where a lot of our ones are, and omit these words, and then put, because that makes it more reasonable and proportionate, or add these words because that makes that fair and stops putting suspicion on parents. Do not give more than 2 sentences of explanation for why, because as I said, they haven't got the time, and they haven't got the big debate they had early. That was committee stage. Report stage is literally about
bang, bang, bang. Can we say, if in case they're unaware, can we say to them, this is currently in report stage?
That's fine. It's just we don't want lots of extra bit. You could add in the subject line currently, Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill currently in report stage, to really make it urgent. You're not just chatting about the bill, you know what's going on. But it's really important that it's snappy. They haven't got the time for that. And they also are really busy. Now, they're not going to put forward the amendment if they don't agree with you. But they may not have thought of the subject. It might not be something that's entered their heads. But the second you tell them this or this, they then need to make a judgment call whether they accept your premise, don't accept your premise, or think, do you know what, I need to go and ask for some research on this to see if I should accept it or not. But if we don't even talk to them, how do they know?
So what happens if enough of them oppose an amendment? at
Well,
report stage.
if enough of them oppose the amendment, we would hope that there'd be a vote on it, and then it would just depend on numbers on the day. If you look at some of the divides on Wednesday, and it's quite disappointing to me how little opposition there was to Clause 4, some of the divides were very close. So actually, if a few more bodies were about to voting, it may have gone a different way. But they need the amendments there to vote on in the first place, and they need to know that people care. So I was aware, that some people weren't going to be about on Wednesday, which meant that it doesn't really matter. They're not going to be voting either way. If they don't know it matters, even if they don't put the amendment in for you, if they don't know it matters, they may not be in the chamber on the day, and then they may not be there to vote. And if it's, it can go through on one vote. So if that one person not knowing it mattered, and if they had known it mattered, would have turned up and gone the way you wanted it on the divide, your email could make the difference between this bill being fixed and maybe coming closer to a solution, or actually being very damaging for future generations.
So there's a question. So somebody who previously wrote to quite a few Lords only had one response. Who do we target this time around? There's a lot of Lords.
Don't worry about responses. They're so busy. Some of the peers who put lots of things in may not write back to you. And I know it feels rude, but in the same instance, as I've just said, you don't need to do all the niceties you would in social things. What might happen, though, is when you look on the amendments list, you might see the amendment you proposed appears from that peer. So although they may not have said to you, brilliant, I'm moving that forward, some of them will just move it forward. So it is really frustrating. So there's no harm in not going back to those same peers. It's just about ensuring you speak to them in the language of someone who's very busy, has no time, and literally just wants to know, what do you want from me? And then just accept that unfortunately they're so busy that sometimes those normal social niceties of saying, thank you very much for that suggestion, just don't happen. There will be some peers who just don't care. And I myself was very upset in the beginning with not getting things back. I've now had more conversations and discovered that actually, people are busy. They may have intended to. And then, once the moment's moved, they've moved on to another bill or so. So if they've engaged, they may just do action. Actually, right now, we sort of have to forget that it'd be nice to be acknowledged and, tune into how they work and get those actions happening.
Yeah, we just need to get it out there. Another reason this is important that we get some new amendments suggested is also because of the next stage, which we call ping pong. Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit about ping pong?
Right. So any things because obviously what the bill looks like now is very different to what it looked like when the bill very started back on the 17th of December last year. At different stages, different things get agreed, bits get taken out, bits get added. Now, obviously, at the end of the House of Commons, that's what the House of Commons have agreed. This is what the bill looks like. Well, now it's gone into the House of Lords, and obviously if they make amendments, they can't overrule the House of Commons as such. So it has to go back to the House of Commons for them to see if they're happy with those amendments. If they're not happy with those amendments, or if they are sort of happy, but they want to refine it a bit. It's like, yeah, okay, we see where you're going. Good idea, but not quite worded right. Then it goes into the bit of going back and forth between the House of Commons and House of Lords till they're happy with the amendments to get that completed bill. So if we've got nothing in there changed, then there's nothing to go back to the House of Commons to be ping-ponged back to the House of Lords for those discussions. And that is the point where we've been speaking to our MPs, and we know a lot of our MPs had not read the bill, not even glanced at it, or had just listened to their party line rather than read what it says back when it was in the House of Commons. A lot of them didn't even realise that there was no data protection impact assessment, which interestingly enough, still there isn't. And they allowed a lot of things through. So the difference is with a lot of MPs now who weren't wise then are wiser now. So this is a two-pronged bit, but our MPs can't do anything to help us if we've not ensured there's something they can help us with. So it's two prongs. We still need to keep talking to our MPs, but we need to get these amendments added, omissions, things like that, changes made so that it can go back to be ping-ponged back to have those discussions, because that's when we can get that nuance in there.
Yeah, this is just very important. Basically, this is our top action for this week, please, as soon as possible. Okay, so we've had some articles in the paper. So some of them, there've been a few. There's been one that talks about a 15% rise in home educators. Other papers that say figures are soaring, and this one says homeschooling surge. Just something to notice is that often we can find these articles coming out with similar messages in different publications. And this one of the those that we've been seeing just this week is all about socialization and all about how we don't. There's been a couple of things. They've been focusing on socialization, and they've been focusing on oh but Europe, and basically saying to us, look, we're still letting you keep these tiny crumbs of freedom, so don't be complaining, because at least we're not like Germany, at least we're not like France. So it's all part of their narrative, it's all part of their influencing public opinion. And so I notice people have been prolific in responding in comments and doing really, really well. So keep that up. But this is the narrative and the rhetoric that we're getting from the Department for Education at the moment. And of course, they're bringing Sarah Sharif back into it, even though it's been acknowledged that this bill would not have protected her. If you come across these articles and there are comments to be made, you need to go and correct this faulty thinking. It is a tactic. This is a tactic. These articles most likely were released by the Department for Education, or have been put out sort of through somebody that's been prompted to by the Department for Education.
And another thing to think about with this one, particularly where they refer to it being banned in Germany, is sort of go, oh, and how did it come about being banned in Germany? There was some law lying around on the statute books that wasn't enacted. A bit like this is a framework bill. We've not given you all the details yet, but we'll put it about so we can do stuff in the future. Then somebody gets in power and they don't need to add any new laws in. They look at the current laws they have, and magically, if they enact the current laws they have in a particular way, they can ban a type of education. Now, I would hope our government are not thinking that a big part of history that is atrocious is a way to look as a way forward. But if they start referring to Germany, just remind them the mirroring, how this bill has a lot of things left to the regulations, left to later. It's all right. Secretary of State is fine. They're benign. Well, you might be, but what about the next Secretary of State? You might be saying, okay, but we're just going to tell them how to assess suitability. We're not going to say you can't home educate. Well, it doesn't mean the next Secretary of State won't take a different position. And if the framework already exists, as this bill is, and it allows the Secretary of State to make regulations, as this bill does, what if the next Secretary of State isn't benign and actually has an agenda that doesn't want us to exist home educating? They won't have to go through this whole process. And it's really important that people realise, because, well, I know even in the interview I was in this week, unfortunately, I'd missed that. I didn't hear that bit they were discussing beforehand, but they referred to, well, it's banned in Germany. So yes, maybe look at the history of that and then think if you think that's a good idea for promoting why you think we should copy that.
Okay, so the UK was always known, and England was always known for promoting freedom, going back as far as slavery and standing up for other countries that were oppressed. The United Kingdom and England in particular has always stood for freedom. That's what the Second World War was partly about that. Now, why are we comparing ourselves to Germany and to France? Why are we comparing ourselves to countries that are not actually about freedom, but are about more socialistic or communist kind of ideologies? So I think this is the thing, is that you always have to chase down the logic and get people to backpedal on the logic to see if it actually stands up to scrutiny. So there's a lot in there that you can see where they are just pulling everything out. And normally this is a sign that they might be concerned that people's thoughts are weakening, that they might not, they're just like, oh wait, no, these people we need to indoctrinate them again, brainwash them again, give them more propaganda, anti-home education and anti-family propaganda. Let's get another article out there. It's like parent blaming, all of that kind of thing kind of comes into that narrative as well. So do go and respond, write a letter to the editor if you can, and just correct anything that needs correcting as well. And perhaps even think of sending in your stories. That might also help. Okie doke, moving on. This is a slightly better story, which I quite like. I had a look at it. Safeguarding can't be a pretext for punishing parents. And we'll forgive them the homeschool in this case. But if you go and read it, it talks about the rise in home education being dramatic. This is quite an interesting, there's a couple of good lines. So basically, it talks about how during the lockdowns and everything, people kind of discovered home education. And they said for many families, home education has become a proactive, thoughtful choice made in the best interests of their children. However, this nuance appears to have been lost. And then it talks about the bill introducing a register, and it talks about the government overreach. And then right at the end, there's a good line which said, and I'm going to just use the word homeschooling because it's what they've written. This is not just about homeschooling; it's about the kind of society we want. One that trusts families to make deeply personal decisions, or one that assumes the worst until the state approves. The bill in its current form may lean worryingly towards the latter. This is actually the kind of article you want to be sending to MPs and so on, to ask them just to consider very carefully what kind of country do we want to have. So this is a good article to be sharing. It's well written, it's thoughtful, it's articulate, it's not sensationalist. So share this one freely if you can. I know it might be behind a paywall, so I bet you when Kat sends out the Substack, it will have a link that you can go and read it. So
she knows your trick.
Yeah, no,
the other bit I just want to make people aware of with you'll see in the actual article it switches between home education and homeschooled. Mm-hmm. If you get an article where the article contains home education in most of it, quite often the title of an article is changed by the editor. So we need to remember that the actual person who's wrote it may realise it's home educating, but they may be overruled by the editor for what gets clicks. And I know when I was talking to people who definitely call it home education, they found that if they add homeschool, it gets more on the algorithms. So it's not always about them not knowing. So if obviously it's got homeschool the whole way through the article, then quite clearly they don't understand or don't know, or they're intentionally trying to insult.
Yeah.
But if the title has homeschool, but the article contains a lot of home education, chances are there was some editorial elements that went in to ensure the algorithms mean the story gets shared.
Yeah, so this is in the iPaper. There are just another line here that I've read that shows the thoughtfulness of the journalist. They raise the point about critics suggest that under the bill, home education could be curtailed even where it secures a child's welfare better than local schools do, especially for those with SEND or severe school anxiety. So you've got someone here who's got a grasp of what the issues are, thankfully, which is nice to see.
And interestingly, I was actually having a conversation with somebody who I know at some point was issued a school attendance order, which names a school that's been in the news for horrendous violence where the teachers are protesting the children. And that's where we're going with this school of thought of like, well, would that ever be in that child's best interest? Which actually a thought for an amendment there with the school attendance order is maybe we need to add a line in that states that a school that's in the lower measures of Ofsted bit can never be named in a school attendance order. Let's twist their best interest back on them.
There you go. Yes, well done. That's a good one. Thanks, Michelle. So Jodie's just saying that most of these article comments are pro-home education. So we have the whole message coming from the SEND sector is helping our narrative. And we can also support, even though I don't have any children that are diagnosed with SEND, I do follow quite a lot of these pages and I do share their things. So it's good if we can help each other out because this bill is going to affect us all.
And sorry to butt in again because I'm being annoying to Juliet. One of the amendments on this that they've added, the government, is their pilot of mandatory meetings with the LA. And in that, as well as saying the parent must attend, if you go down a bit after they've explained all the things that are going to be discussed in this meeting, which includes if your child has SEND and what their needs might be and everything else, they've got a bit that states that they expect the child to attend. Now, if you have a child like mine, you would know that the worst thing you ever could do would be to sit them in a meeting and let them listen to you go through all the deficits, because they're thriving because you support them in the right way. So that's one where you can use your head knowing how that could harm and give them a little nudge on a couple of words to fix that, because that really is not appropriate for many children. And again, very quick email there. You're just saying, omit this or add this. Very quick email.
Yeah. And Marita's just reminding, and I remember her doing this, where she asked the DFE if a child could be sent to a school that is deemed to be failing, if they could be sent through a school attendance order to a failing school, and they couldn't answer that. Didn't know what to say.
Well, some areas there are a lot of failing schools, so they would struggle to find a school to name otherwise.
Yeah, reality bites.
That is a good point. And again, very simple one to try and fix their bill for them.
Yeah. So something that you can, if you can come up with some amendments regarding failing schools and some of the things that are in the bill, that would be really good.
I found it quite helpful looking at the area that MP is in and how many schools are failing in their area to kind of help sway it.
Yeah. Okay, and then I think what's next is that we were just talking about these news articles and the figures and the stats that are being thrown around. And Amy's going to take us through a bit of a breakdown for us to understand what they're saying and why we should be questioning the figures that they put out.
Yeah, so some of the figures that are going around at the moment are that we have increased by 15%, that we are soaring and we are basically taking over the world. Mwahaha. I'm here to tell you that there is a figure of 126,000 on the survey date. So this is a census that they do, which takes a snapshot. A lot of the papers are saying higher figures because that is a figure that accumulates over that term. So if you deregister in September, but then you decide to put your child back in 2 weeks later, that figure would then be counted. There's about 30,000 children difference in that figure. So it helps their cause to deliberately choose the at any time in that survey. So that capturing of that data is like across several months rather than just that set date that they've asked all the LAs to do. So all of my data is using the snapshot census data so that there's uniformity. Last year we had an argument from media stating that parents are snipping their children out of school for hasty reasons and not actually persevering. However, you can see that year on year, the same pattern over and over again. We increase up to year 11 when parents say, do you know what, the exams are just far too much stress, and then taking their child out, which then is going to impact how much we need that exam access. Because as more people take their children out in year 11, it's making that resource of exam centres even more rare to get. So something to definitely use when speaking to your MP. So I took all of the reasons for home education and put them in a pie chart, and it looks really messy. I gave it a theme. So green is positive, red is a school-based issue, like they've not got their school place or they've been permanently excluded, and then the yellow is health reasons, and grey tones are they just didn't catch the data. So if we go back to the bar chart, grouping those together helps us because they added 3 new categories of why you could be on this register this year, which is great because it means those categories are just for this year. They're not an accumulation of all the previous years. So it gives us a really good idea when we say that there were 300 that didn't choose to register at school. We can say that was this year. But by combining them into these groups, we can then easily compare them to the previous year. And you can see that out of the 3 options, we have that a positive choice was the primary reason. However, I now know from speaking to other home educators that they do not want this data being recorded and have been deliberately leaving that box blank or putting none, which then means that stat goes into the other box, which fills up that grey column there. So it's very likely that those that have refused their data are actually in that column and they're part of that positive or that negative. We just don't know. Imagine if you had to submit all the data that the bill is proposing.
If I may interject, that in some groups, they do say you don't have to tell. There's nothing to that you have to give your reason for home educating. A lot of home educators, are, they just feel and I feel the same way personally, is that if you're not required to give that information, don't. You just give what you have to give, and that's it.
It is quite interesting that there are, for example, 505 children over the years of data gathering. The reasons for home education were actually physically unable to attend school. So those are children that should be receiving an education at home by the state, but they've been put in the home education bracket. So you can kind of see how our numbers are being overinflated almost deliberately.
They're fattening them up a bit.
Yeah, they're fattening our stats up because these are actually not elective home educating parents.
School placement issues is not home education.
No, it's not. Yeah. Permanent exclusion, didn't get your desired school place. All of these are school created dramas that have fattened up our figures. So this is just a very brief graph to show how the numbers have increased by percentage. So you can see that we kind of had a bit of a peak last year, and then we've suddenly dropped lower than 23-24.
And which months do they do this one?
To explain
Amy?
Why we have dropped in growth.
Amy, may I ask, in which month would they normally get this?
The autumn term.
Okay.
So it would be the September intake.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Next. So the 25-26 one's already been taken. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's not a 15% increase, is it?
No, it's not. It's 12.8% increase. So they've overinflated it to make it fit their narrative. Going along with the whole, it's soaring, we're all out of control, we're growing at a rapid rate, everybody watch out for the home educators, they're taking over. You can see from the DFE site, this is them using the amount of home education in relation to the total compulsory school age child statistics, all bundled into one. So out of the mass picture of the possibilities, the pie slice, we only contribute this past year to 1.5% of that total. Are we a big threat in regards to education and taking away school pupils from school? Bit debatable. Last year, as I said, there was a spike. But what I find quite interesting is we need to kind of go through and dissect this a bit. So I use very clean, detailed data. So I use the school pupils that are attending school. I don't add in CME, Section 19, alternative provisions and everything else. I literally compared schools to us because they are saying they want us in that school. So when you look at how much we are actually as part of the school population, we are actually only 1% because we have dropped, according to their stats, back under that 1% marker. So we were up to 1.24% last year, and we've dropped back down to that 1% this year. I can't find the number of school pupils for this year because that data has not yet been released, and I don't want to just throw it out there like the DFE do. The number of CME is 34,700. Now, the reason why this is so important and why I don't use the figures that the DFE are using to show what a percentage we are of the whole picture is because Michelle's Freedom of Information requests showed that CME is not uniformly defined local authority to local authority. So in some local authorities, they include home education in the CME figures. So if I was to take a percentage of the total number, including CME, I would be counting what percent of home ed are part of the home ed.
This happens when people confuse education with school, because children missing school is not children missing education.
No, and it is so frustrating because the statement there, it makes it almost clear as mud, doesn't it? That is what CME is.
I think they purposefully muddy the waters, to be honest.
Using just the DFE stats, because obviously that's what I can use to show you the pattern that they are looking at. But bear in mind that this isn't perfect data, and I don't like working with unclean, imperfect data, but that's what I'm getting given. You can see that the message that we are soaring and that we are increasing our numbers and we're taking over the world is so fictitious and laughable that actually we are reducing our growth massively this year. So the trend of home educating has dropped off. We are still growing, but just not in line with the amount of inflation of pupil numbers. So it's really quite interesting that they've managed to spin this story. And when you actually look from the other side and you take a look from a different angle, you can kind of see where they're really trying to make us into the bad guy here.
Yeah, we're being demonized with no evidence to show that it's necessary.
Kat kindly did a data grab on school attendance orders and that process of warning people that they're not happy with the evidence that they have provided or the report that they've done or the communication or whatever. And we then did a percentage of the total number of home educators in that area. Bear in mind, this data is scaled to each local authority. So South Tyneside have sent 90% of their total home educator numbers
population, yeah,
a notice to satisfy, a section 437 part 1. So they've then only taken like 2.33% of them through to attendance order, but that's besides the point. If you get a letter on your doorstep threatening you with a school attendance order, you're going to feel a little bit harassed and scared. And some of these local authorities, Nottinghamshire came up as I think it was 250 school attendance orders, and 200 of them were revoked. So
I do have a question about that because how many of are these school attendance orders purely for home educators or for children missing education as well?
The stats that we've got, I'm assuming, are for home educators. That's why we've made it a percentage of the home education figures.
You've got preliminary notice the notice to satisfy wouldn't go to somebody who's CME, would it?
Yeah,
would only go to a home educator.
But there you are. There's your top 10 baddies for section 437 part 1s. You can see Portsmouth is up there and nobody likes Portsmouth. Central Bedfordshire done a bad job, but Bedford themselves have done a good job. So, bittersweet. That's basically me debunking all of the media. And bear in mind, I read 850 articles across the globe a couple of years ago, and the tactics that the media are going to use haven't changed.
No.
They always start off trying to be positive by using a home educator or a homeschooler, and then they always come back with a balanced view from a statement from the DFE
A
or
so-called balance due from
balance it out a little bit. But just be very aware if you get asked to go and speak to someone in the media, that this is what they are going to be focusing on, is the statistics.
And actually, Amy, honestly, I feel like you should be putting together a little briefing for some newspapers using these figures and sending it to some of the newspapers to give them a real story to get their teeth into, all about the massaged figures. But that is really shameful that they do that. Thank you for bearing with us if you've stuck with us this evening. This is crunch time, so there is a lot to talk about, and we do need to be fighting on all fronts. Some of us are really, really worn down and tired, so we need others who've still got a bit of energy to keep going when we're flagging a little bit and help each other out. If you're on Twitter, please, or X, go and reshare Lord Way's posts about the bill. So you can go and retweet those again and again to highlight those as well. And you can also tag MPs and Lords and so on. Any last words, anybody?
Just what we were saying about the peers. If you've been inspired and you think, actually, yes, I could literally say, if they add that word or that word in, it might make this bill look a little bit better. Doesn't need to look massive, just a little bit better. Then please just shoot that email off. Don't double think it. Don't overthink it. The worst that will happen is they'll ignore your email. Best that can happen, we see a new amendment paper that has that little amendment in, and then it can be discussed, which means we might get that really important ping pong time. Don't delay, don't overthink it, just get those emails in.
Yeah, Simon Squibb is also talking about the bill again, so if you find his post, you can go and reshare that too. Whatever we need to do, get it out there. Take care and have a great weekend.